The auction notice in the Fort Garland, Colorado newspaper advertised a cattle ranch for $1 minimum bid on a bitter December morning in 1885. And Helena Tucker knew her life was about to change the moment she read those words while warming her frost-nipped fingers by the potbelly stove in the Mercantile. She had arrived in this small mountain town 3 weeks earlier with nothing but her deceased father's leather satchel, $43 sewn into her petticoat, and a heart still raw from burying both parents within 6 months of each other back in Missouri. The consumption had taken her mother in May, and her father had simply lost the will to live, following her into the grave come November. At 22 years old, Helena found herself orphaned, unmarried, and entirely alone in a world that had little patience for women without protection or prospects. The Mercantile owner, Mrs. Calloway, peered over her spectacles with concern. That Whitmore property has been abandoned for near about 8 months now. Old Samuel Whitmore died with no heirs, and the bank has been trying to unload it ever since. But Miss Tucker, a woman alone cannot possibly manage a cattle operation, especially not through a Colorado winter. Helena folded the newspaper with deliberate care, her hazel eyes reflecting a determination that had carried her across 3 states. Mrs. Calloway, I appreciate your concern, but I grew up working my father's farm from the time I could walk. I know livestock, I know hard work, and I know that opportunities like this do not come twice to women like me. The older woman shook her head, but there was a glimmer of respect in her expression. The auction is tomorrow at 10 o'clock sharp at the courthouse. You will need to register beforehand. And child, dress warm. This December has been the coldest in memory. That night, Helena lay awake in her cramped boarding house room, listening to the wind howl through the mountain passes. She had counted her money 7 times. After paying for 3 weeks of lodging and meals, she had $31 remaining. Enough to bid, enough to survive perhaps a month if she was careful, but not nearly enough to stock a ranch or repair whatever damage 8 months of abandonment had surely caused. But something in her chest, something fierce and bright, told her this was meant to be. Her mother had always said she had inherited her grandmother's intuition, and right now that intuition was singing. The courthouse was packed with men the next morning, their breath forming clouds in the frigid air as they stomped snow from their boots and eyed each other with competitive suspicion. Helena entered quietly, her wool coat buttoned to her chin, her chestnut hair pinned severely beneath a practical hat. She felt the weight of their stares, heard the murmurs, but kept her spine straight and her expression neutral. The auctioneer, a portly man with magnificent mutton chops, banged his gavel. "Gentleman and lady," he added with a nod toward Helena, "we are here to auction the Whitmore Ranch, consisting of approximately 800 acres, 1 main house, 1 barn, various outbuildings, and water rights to Trinchera Creek. Property is sold as is, with no guarantees or warranties. Minimum bid is $1. A ripple of laughter went through the crowd. One prosperous-looking rancher in the front row called out, "I will bid $5 just to save us all some time." $10. Another man countered. Helena waited, her gloved hands folded in her lap. She had learned patience from her father, who always said the best time to move was when everyone else had stopped moving. The bids climbed slowly. $15, $20, $25. Then they seemed to stall. The men looked at each other, clearly puzzled by the low prices. Helena understood why. A ranch in this condition, abandoned through winter, was a gamble nobody wanted. The work required would be immense, the risk substantial. $25 going once, the auctioneer droned. Going twice. $30, Helena said clearly, rising to her feet. Every head swiveled toward her. The prosperous rancher who had bid first laughed outright. "Little lady, do you have any idea what you are getting into?" She met his gaze steadily. "I know exactly what I am getting into, sir, and my money is as good as yours." The auctioneer seemed flustered. "Ah, yes, we have $30 from Miss Tucker. Do I hear 35? Silence. The men looked at each other, then at Helena, then shrugged. Apparently none of them wanted to fight a woman over what they clearly considered a worthless property. $30 going once, going twice, sold to Miss Helena Tucker for $30. She could barely breathe as she approached the desk to complete the paperwork, counting out her precious bills with trembling fingers. The deed was transferred, signed, stamped. The auctioneer handed her a heavy iron key. "Good luck, miss. You are going to need it." Helena hired a wagon and driver to take her out to the property that same afternoon. The sky was heavy with the promise of more snow, and the temperature had dropped so dramatically that ice crystals seemed to hang suspended in the air itself. They traveled south from Fort Garland along a rough track, the horses laboring through drifts, until finally the driver pointed to a cluster of buildings in the distance. "That is the Whitmore place. I will wait 1 hour, no more. This weather is turning bad." She paid him half his fee with the promise of the rest upon return and climbed down from the wagon, her boots sinking into snow that reached her knees. The main house loomed before her, a 2-story structure with a wraparound porch and dark, empty windows. The barn stood to the left, its doors hanging open like a mouth caught mid-scream. Various sheds and outbuildings dotted the property, all showing signs of neglect and weather damage. Helena approached the house slowly, her heart hammering. Up close, she could see the peeling paint, the broken shutters, the way snow had drifted through gaps in the porch boards. The key turned stiffly in the lock, and the front door opened with a shriek of rusty hinges. The interior was dim and bitterly cold, but largely intact. Furniture stood beneath dust covers. A massive stone fireplace dominated one wall of what appeared to be a sitting room. She moved through the space carefully, her footsteps echoing, exploring a kitchen with a cast iron stove, a dining room with a long table, and a study lined with bookshelves. It was in the study that she noticed something odd. One section of the bookshelf seemed different from the others. The wood was a slightly different shade, and there were no books on those particular shelves, only decorative items. Helena approached it, running her fingers along the edges, and felt a slight depression. She pressed it. The bookshelf swung inward with a groan, revealing a narrow passageway descending into darkness, her breath caught in her throat. A secret passage. In her house. In the house she had purchased for $30. She needed light. Returning to the kitchen, she found an old oil lamp with just enough fuel remaining. Once lit, she returned to the study and carefully descended the hidden stairs. They went down perhaps 15 feet before opening into a small underground room. The lamp light flickered across something that made Helena gasp. Gold. Stacks upon stacks of gold bars, neatly arranged on wooden shelves. Alongside them were leather bags that clinked with the unmistakable sound of coins. Papers were stored in oilskin packets, and she carefully opened one to find certificates, bonds, and documents that appeared to be mining claims. Samuel Whitmore had not just been a rancher. He had been a very successful miner who had hidden his fortune beneath his home. Helena sank down onto the bottom step, her mind reeling. This changed everything. This changed her entire future. She was not just a woman with an abandoned ranch anymore. She was a woman with means, with security, with options. But she was also a woman alone with a fortune in a lawless territory where men killed for far less. The wagon driver's shout from outside jolted her from her thoughts. "Miss Tucker, time to go. Storm is coming in fast." She extinguished the lamp, replaced it where she had found it, and closed the secret panel carefully. Everything else could wait. She needed time to think, to plan, to figure out her next move. The ride back to Fort Garland was a battle against increasingly hostile weather. Snow fell in thick, heavy flakes that reduced visibility to almost nothing. By the time they reached town, the driver was cursing under his breath, and Helena was shivering so hard her teeth chattered. She paid the driver his remaining fee and stumbled into the boarding house, where Mrs. Kellerman, the proprietor, took one look at her and insisted on hot tea and a warm brick for her bed. That night, Helena lay awake once more, but now her thoughts raced in entirely different directions. She had gold, enough gold to restore the ranch, to hire help, to build something substantial. But revealing it would paint a target on her back. Men would come sniffing around, either to court her for her money or to simply take it by force. She needed help. She needed someone she could trust. But who, in a town where she had been a stranger for less than a month? The storm lasted 3 days, trapping everyone indoors and burying Fort Garland under more than 2 feet of snow. When it finally cleared, the sky was a brilliant, piercing blue, and the sunlight reflecting off the snow was almost blinding. Helena ventured to the mercantile to purchase supplies. She needed to return to the ranch, needed to secure that hidden room properly, needed to begin making plans. Mrs. Calloway greeted her with surprised delight. "Miss Tucker, I had heard you actually won that auction. Brave or foolish, I have not yet decided which." "Have you been out to see the property?" "I have. The house is sound, though it needs work. I plan to move out there within the week." Mrs. Calloway's eyebrows rose. "Alone, my dear, that is not wise. The ranch is isolated and there have been reports of drifters and worse in those hills. You need at least a hired hand or two. Do you know of anyone looking for work?" The older woman considered this, tapping her chin. "There is a young man who has been doing odd jobs around town, Ethan Mercer. He arrived about 2 months back, also from somewhere back east. Keeps to himself mostly, but he is a hard worker and honest. People trust him. He has been staying in the livery loft, doing carpentry and ranch work for day wages." Helena felt that intuitive pull again. "Where might I find him?" "Try the livery stable. If he is not there, someone will know where he is." The livery was warm and smelled of horses, hay, and leather. A massive draft horse occupied the nearest stall, and Helena could hear the sound of hammering from somewhere deeper in the building. She followed the sound to find a man repairing a stall door, his back to her. "Excuse me, I am looking for Ethan Mercer." He turned, and Helena found herself looking at a man probably a few years older than herself, perhaps 26 or 27. He was tall and lean, with dark hair that fell across his forehead and eyes the color of a summer storm, gray-blue and intense. His face was angular and weathered, with the look of someone who had seen more of life than he wanted to. But it was an honest face, she thought. A good face. "I am Ethan Mercer." His voice was deep and careful, with the slight accent of someone from the northeastern states. "What can I do for you, miss?" "My name is Helena Tucker. I recently purchased the Whitmore Ranch, and I am in need of hired help. Mrs. Calloway suggested I speak with you." Something flickered in his expression, surprise perhaps. "You are the woman who bought that place? I heard about that." He set down his hammer, wiping his hands on his pants. "Miss Tucker, I will be honest with you. That property has been sitting empty for months. It will take serious work to make it operational again, especially heading into the heart of winter." "I understand that, which is why I need someone capable and willing to work hard. Mrs. Calloway says you are both." He studied her for a long moment, and she had the sensation of being carefully assessed. "What exactly are you proposing?" room, board, and fair wages. I need someone to help repair the buildings, tend to livestock once I can afford to purchase some, and help with the general operation of the ranch. I will not pretend this is an easy job, Mr. Mercer, but it is honest work, and I pay what I promise." Ethan leaned against the stall door, crossing his arms. "Why me? There are plenty of ranch hands drifting through Fort Garland." Helena met his gaze directly. "Because Mrs. Calloway trusts you. Because you are not from here, which means you are less likely to be entangled in local politics or grudges. And because something tells me you understand what it is like to need a fresh start." A smile tugged at the corner of his mouth, brief but genuine. "You are perceptive, Miss Tucker. You are right on all counts." He paused, seeming to come to a decision. "I will take the job. When do you want me to start?" "Tomorrow morning, if that suits you. Meet me at the boarding house at dawn and we will ride out together. Bring whatever belongings you have." They shook hands, and Helena noticed that his grip was firm but careful, the hands calloused from hard work but surprisingly gentle. As she walked back to the boarding house, she felt lighter than she had in months. She had a ranch, a secret fortune, and now an ally. She just prayed she was right to trust him. Ethan Mercer was waiting outside the boarding house when Helena emerged the next morning, the sky still dark and scattered with fading stars. He had a rucksack slung over one shoulder and a rifle case over the other. 2 horses stood beside him, already saddled. "I borrowed these from the livery," he explained. "Figured we would need transportation until you can arrange something more permanent. I will return them in a few days." The ride out to the ranch took nearly 2 hours in the snow. They rode in companionable silence for the most part, though occasionally Ethan would point out a landmark or comment on the condition of the trail. Helena appreciated that he did not feel the need to fill every moment with chatter. When the ranch came into view in the strengthening morning light, Ethan pulled his horse to a stop and simply stared. "It is bigger than I expected, and the house is actually in decent shape from what I can see. The interior is solid. It needs cleaning and some repairs, but it is livable. The barn is in worse condition." They spent that first day simply assessing the property. Ethan proved to be methodical and knowledgeable, making notes of everything that needed attention. The barn roof had several areas where snow had gotten in, rotting some of the hay that remained. The doors needed new hinges. The fencing around what had been corrals was down in multiple places, buried under snow and ice, but there was also much that was salvageable. The well was deep and still drawing clean water. The chicken coop could be repaired easily enough. The house, as Helena had noted, was fundamentally sound. That evening they worked together to get the kitchen stove going and prepare a simple meal of beans and cornbread. As they ate at the long dining table, Ethan looked around the room with an expression Helena could not quite read. This must have been quite a place in its day. Samuel Whitmore clearly took pride in his home. "Did you know him?" "No, I arrived after he had already passed, but I heard stories. He was something of a local legend, came out here during the gold rush days and made his fortune, then settled down to ranching. People said he was fair but private, never married, no family anyone knew about." Helena thought of the hidden room beneath their feet and said nothing. Over the next 2 weeks, they fell into a rhythm. Ethan proved himself to be exactly what he had been advertised, a tireless worker who knew his way around tools, livestock, and the 100 small tasks required to run a ranch. He repaired the barn roof, fixed the stove's flue, reinforced the porch, and cut enough firewood to see them through several months. Helena worked alongside him, proving that her claims about growing up on a farm were not empty boasts. She could handle an axe, mend a fence, and work from dawn until dusk without complaint. In the evenings, they would sit by the fire in the sitting room, too exhausted for much conversation but comfortable in the shared silence. She found herself watching him sometimes when he was focused on a task. The way his hands moved with such competence and surety. The way he would pause to consider a problem before acting. The way his rare smiles transformed his serious face into something warm and open. She was also aware that he was watching her, though he was subtle about it. Sometimes she would look up to find his gray-blue eyes on her, an expression of puzzlement in them, as though she were a riddle he was trying to solve. On the 16th day after they had arrived at the ranch, Helena decided she needed to tell him about the gold. Not all of it, perhaps, but enough to explain how she planned to truly restore the property. She could not keep operating on the few remaining dollars she had, and she needed to start making real purchases. Livestock, seed, supplies. That would require explanation. They had just finished dinner and were sitting in the study, where Ethan had built up a fire to chase away the brutal cold. Snow was falling again outside, soft and steady, blanketing the world in white silence. "Ethan, I need to tell you something." He looked up from the piece of harness leather he was mending, his attention immediately focused. "All right." She took a deep breath. "When I first came out here to inspect the property, I found something Samuel Whitmore left behind." His expression sharpened with interest. "What kind of something?" "Money. Quite a bit of money, actually, hidden in the house." Ethan set down the leather slowly. "How much money are we talking about?" "Enough to fully restore this ranch and stock it properly. Enough to hire additional help if needed. Enough to build something real here." He was quiet for a long moment, his eyes searching her face. "Why are you telling me this?" "Because I need help, and I cannot do this alone. Because hiding it from you felt like a betrayal when you have been working so hard. And because I want you to understand that I can pay you properly now, real wages, not just the few dollars I promised initially." "Where is this money?" Helena hesitated only briefly, then rose and pressed the hidden panel. The bookshelf swung open, revealing the dark passage beyond. Ethan stood, his expression stunned, and followed her down the stairs as she lit the lamp. The gold gleamed in the flickering light. Ethan stopped at the bottom of the steps, staring at the small fortune before them. He let out a long, slow breath. "My God, this is not just money, Helena. This is life-changing wealth." It was the first time he had used her given name, and the sound of it in his voice did something strange to her heartbeat. "I know. Which is why I need you to understand how dangerous this is. If word gets out, people will come. People who would not hesitate to kill us both for what is in this room." Ethan turned to look at her, his face serious in the lamplight. "Have you told anyone else?" "No one. You are the only person who knows. And you trust me with this. You barely know me." Helena met his gaze steadily. "I trust you. I cannot explain why entirely, but I do. I have learned to listen to my instincts, and my instincts say you are a good man." Something shifted in his expression, a vulnerability appearing beneath the careful control. "Your instincts may be overly generous. I am not sure I have done anything to earn that kind of trust. You have worked yourself to exhaustion for 2 weeks for a woman you did not know, on a failing ranch, for wages I could barely pay. That tells me what I need to know about your character." He looked away, jaw tight. "There are things about me you do not know, things about why I came west." "Then tell me." Ethan was silent for so long she thought he would not answer. Then he sighed, running a hand through his dark hair. "I was engaged to be married back in Boston. Catherine was her name. We had known each other since childhood, and everyone assumed we would wed. I was working in my father's import business, living the life that had been planned for me since birth." He paused, his voice roughening slightly. "Then I discovered my father was running schemes through the business. defrauding clients, manipulating books, things that could land people in prison. When I confronted him, he tried to convince me it was just how business was done. When I refused to participate, he threatened to destroy my reputation, to make sure I could never work in Boston again. Helena listened in silence as he continued. Catherine sided with my father, said I was being naive and foolish, that I should just play along, so I left. Took only what I could carry, got on a train west and never looked back. That was 8 months ago. You gave up everything rather than compromise your principles, Helena said softly. That makes you exactly the kind of man I thought you were. His eyes found hers, and the look in them made her breath catch. You amaze me, you know that. You bought a ranch by yourself. You work like someone twice your size, and you stand there telling me you trust me with a fortune in gold without even a hint of fear. Should I be afraid of you? No. The word was immediate and fierce. I would never hurt you, Helena. I would die before I let anyone hurt you. The intensity in his voice, in his face, made warmth spread through her chest. They stood there in the lamp-lit hidden room, surrounded by gold, staring at each other as something fundamental shifted between them. We should get back upstairs, Helena finally said, though she made no move to go. It is cold down here. Helena, wait. Ethan reached out, his hand hovering near her arm but not quite touching. If we are going to do this, if we are going to use this money to build something, we need to be smart about it. We cannot suddenly start spending lavishly or people will ask questions. I know. I have been thinking about that. We tell people I sold some personal items, family jewelry or something similar. We spend carefully and gradually. And we need to protect this place. Better locks, weapons if necessary. This is remote enough that if someone decided to raid it, help would not arrive in time. Helena nodded. I have my father's revolver. Can you shoot? I can. And I will teach you to shoot better if you do not already know how. Out here, you need to be able to defend yourself. They made their way back upstairs and closed the hidden panel. The fire had burned low in the study, and Ethan moved to add more wood while Helena tried to process everything that had happened. The revelation of the gold, Ethan's story, the way he had looked at her in that underground room. Ethan, she said suddenly, thank you for being honest with me. For staying. He looked at her over his shoulder, and that rare, genuine smile appeared. Thank you for trusting me. I will not let you down. That night, lying in her bed with quilts piled high against the cold, Helena admitted to herself what she had been trying to ignore for days. She was developing feelings for Ethan Mercer. Strong feelings. It was foolish, perhaps, to grow attached to a man she had known for such a short time. But there was something about him that called to her, a fundamental goodness mixed with strength and gentleness that she had never encountered before. And the way he had looked at her tonight suggested she might not be alone in those feelings. Winter deepened its grip on the Colorado mountains. The temperature dropped so low that water froze solid within minutes of being drawn from the well. They moved through the days focused on survival and necessary preparations. But there was a new awareness between them now, a charge in the air whenever they were in the same room. True to his word, Ethan began teaching Helena to shoot. They would spend an hour each afternoon when weather permitted, setting up targets in the snow and practicing until her hands were numb with cold. She proved to be a decent shot, though Ethan was far better. You are thinking too much, he said one afternoon, standing behind her as she aimed at a bottle balanced on a fence post. Trust your instincts. Breathe out slowly and squeeze the trigger, do not pull it. His voice was low and close to her ear, his presence warm at her back. Helena tried to focus on the target, but she was intensely aware of how near he was, near enough that she could feel the heat radiating from him. She squeezed the trigger. The bottle exploded into glittering shards. "There," Ethan said, approval warm in his voice. "Perfect." She turned to look at him and found his face much closer than she had expected. They stood there, neither moving, the cold air forgotten. His eyes dropped to her mouth and she saw his throat work as he swallowed. "Helena," he said, his voice rough. "Yes, I should step back. Should you? I am your employee. This is not appropriate. You are my partner in all of this, and I am an adult woman capable of making my own decisions." His hand came up slowly, giving her every opportunity to move away, and cupped her cheek with infinite gentleness. His thumb brushed across her cheekbone and she leaned into the touch. "I have been trying not to feel this way," he admitted. "Trying to keep my distance, to remain professional. But God help me, Helena, I cannot stop thinking about you." Her heart was hammering so hard she was sure he could hear it. "I think about you too, constantly. This is complicated. You are my employer, you have a fortune hidden in your house, and we are isolated out here with winter storms that could trap us for weeks." "If this goes wrong, then it goes wrong," Helena interrupted. "But Ethan, I did not come west to play it safe. I came to build a life, and I want to build it with someone who makes me feel the way you do." Something broke in his expression, the careful control falling away. He leaned down slowly, giving her time to refuse, and then his lips were on hers, gentle and questioning. Helena rose on her toes, her hands coming up to grip his coat, kissing him back with all the longing she had been suppressing. The kiss deepened, growing more passionate, his arms coming around her to pull her against him. She could feel his heart racing to match her own, could feel the tremor in his hands as they moved to her waist. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Ethan rested his forehead against hers. "I am in love with you," he said, the words tumbling out as though he could not hold them back. "I know it is too soon. I know it is probably crazy, but I cannot pretend anymore. I love you, Helena Tucker." Joy exploded in her chest, bright and fierce. "I love you too. I think I have since the moment you turned around in that livery stable." He laughed, a sound of pure happiness, and kissed her again. They stood there in the snow, holding each other, until the cold finally drove them back to the house. That evening, as they sat together on the settee in the sitting room, Helena's head on Ethan's shoulder and his arm around her, she felt a contentment she had never known. Yes, there were challenges ahead. Yes, there was danger inherent in their situation. But for the first time since her parents had died, she felt like she was home. "We should get married," Ethan said suddenly. Helena lifted her head to look at him. "Are you proposing?" He shifted, taking both her hands in his. "I am doing this badly, I know, but yes, I am proposing. Helena, we are already living in the same house, already building a life together. I love you more than I have ever loved anyone. I want to wake up beside you for the rest of my life. I want to build this ranch with you, raise a family with you, grow old with you. Marry me, please." Tears stung her eyes, but she was smiling so wide her face hurt. "Yes, of course, yes." He kissed her again, deep and thorough, and she melted against him. When they finally drew apart, both of them were grinning like fools. "We will have to wait until the weather clears to go into town and arrange it properly," Ethan said. "But as far as I am concerned, you are already my wife. And you are my husband." They were married on a brilliantly clear day in late January, in a simple ceremony at the small church in Fort Garland. Mrs. Calloway and her husband stood as witnesses, both beaming with delight. Helena wore a simple blue dress she had purchased with some of the gold, and Ethan wore a new suit that made him look devastatingly handsome. The minister pronounced them man and wife, and when Ethan kissed her, Helena felt her entire world shift and settle into perfect alignment. They returned to the ranch as husband and wife, and that night, alone in the main bedroom they now shared, they came together with tenderness and passion. Ethan was gentle and patient, making sure she felt safe and cherished, and Helena gave herself to him completely, holding nothing back. Afterward, they lay tangled together beneath the quilts, the fire casting dancing shadows on the walls. Ethan traced lazy patterns on her shoulder, his voice drowsy with contentment. "I never imagined I could be this happy. 6 months ago, I was running from everything I had ever known, convinced I had ruined my life. Now I am lying here with the most incredible woman I have ever met in our home, building our future." Helena turned to press a kiss to his chest. "I was so lost after my parents died. I thought I would spend the rest of my life alone, struggling to survive. You have given me hope, Ethan. You have given me love. You have given me everything. We have given each other everything. That is what partnership means." She smiled against his skin. "Tell me what you see when you imagine our future." "I see this ranch thriving. Cattle in the fields, horses in the barn, chickens providing eggs. I see us working side by side during the day and falling asleep in each other's arms at night. I see children, a whole house full of them if you want. I see us growing old together, watching our grandchildren play in that same snow we are trudging through now." He paused, his voice dropping to something almost reverent. "I see happiness, Helena, real, lasting happiness." "I see the same thing," she whispered, "every bit of it." February brought more storms, but they were prepared now. The house was tight and warm, the larder well stocked. They spent the long winter evenings planning for spring, deciding what livestock to purchase first, which fields to cultivate, how to gradually restore the ranch without drawing too much attention. They were careful with the gold, taking only small amounts when they went into town, always with a cover story prepared. They told people Helena had inherited some money from a distant relative, enough to make modest improvements but nothing extravagant. In early March, when the first signs of thaw began appearing, they made a significant purchase. 20 head of cattle from a rancher whose spread was being divided up among his many sons. The cattle were good quality breeding stock, and at the price they paid, it was clear they had gotten a bargain. Ethan and Helena worked together to get the cattle settled, repairing fences and clearing the barn of the last winter debris. It was hard, exhausting work, but they were building something real, something that would last. One evening, as they were finishing the dinner dishes, Helena felt a wave of dizziness wash over her. She gripped the edge of the sink, waiting for it to pass. "Helena, are you all right?" Ethan was at her side immediately, his hand on her back. "I am fine, just a little lightheaded." But over the next few days, it kept happening. And she noticed other things too. Her breasts were tender, and she had missed her monthly courses. A suspicion began growing in her mind, one that filled her with equal parts joy and terror. She waited another week to be sure, then told Ethan one night as they were getting ready for bed, "I think I am pregnant." He froze in the act of removing his shirt, then slowly turned to face her. "You think you are pregnant?" "My courses are late. I have been feeling dizzy and sick in the mornings. All the signs are there." For a moment he just stared at her, his expression unreadable. Then a smile broke across his face, so brilliant and pure that it took her breath away. He crossed the room in 2 strides and swept her into his arms, spinning her around. "We are going to have a baby." "Helena, we are going to have a baby," she laughed, holding on to him, feeling his joy infuse her own. When he set her down, his hands framed her face, and he kissed her with such tenderness she felt tears spring to her eyes. "I am going to take care of you," he promised. "Both of you, I swear it." "I know you will." The pregnancy progressed smoothly through the spring and into the summer. Ethan was attentive to the point of being overprotective, constantly trying to prevent Helena from doing any heavy work. She tolerated this for about a week before putting her foot down. "Ethan Mercer, I am pregnant. not made of glass. I can still pull my weight around here. But what if you hurt yourself? What if something happens to the baby? Women have been working through pregnancies since the dawn of time. I will be sensible, I promise. But I cannot just sit in the house for 6 months. They compromised. Helena handled lighter tasks and let Ethan take on anything too strenuous. As her belly grew round and prominent, she found herself overwhelmed with love for the child growing inside her and for the man who would be its father. They hired a local woman, Sarah Pritchard, to help with household tasks and to be present when the baby came. Sarah was in her 50s, a widow with grown children of her own, and she took to Helena immediately. She moved into one of the spare bedrooms and proved to be invaluable, helping with cooking, cleaning, and the endless tasks required to run a household. "You have done well for yourself, Mrs. Mercer," Sarah said one afternoon as they worked together in the kitchen garden. "Your husband clearly adores you, and this ranch is becoming one of the finest in the area." Helena smiled, one hand resting on her swollen belly where the baby was kicking vigorously. "I have been blessed, more than I ever imagined possible." The cattle were thriving on the good summer grass. Ethan had proven himself to be as skilled with livestock as he was with carpentry and repairs. They hired 2 additional ranch hands for the busy season, young men from town who were hardworking and respectful. Everything was falling into place. Labor began on a hot August afternoon. Helena had been feeling restless all day, a low ache in her back that gradually intensified. When the first real contraction hit, she was in the sitting room and had to grip the back of a chair to stay upright. Sarah took charge immediately, getting Helena upstairs to the bedroom while sending one of the ranch hands to fetch the doctor from Fort Garland. Ethan paced outside the door, his face pale with worry. The labor lasted through the night and into the next morning. Helena endured the pain with gritted teeth, holding Sarah's hand through the worst contractions. She could hear Ethan's voice through the door at various points, asking for updates, his anxiety palpable. Finally, as the sun was beginning to climb the sky with one last tremendous effort, Helena brought her child into the world. The baby's cry filled the room, strong and healthy. "It is a boy," the doctor announced, laying the squirming infant on Helena's chest. "A fine, healthy boy." Helena looked down at her son, at his tiny, perfect features and the dark fuzz of hair on his head, and felt her heart expand to encompass this new love. Tears streamed down her face as she cradled him close. "Can my husband come in?" she asked. Ethan entered the room looking terrified and hopeful all at once. When he saw Helena holding the baby, his expression crumbled into wonder. He approached the bed slowly as though afraid to disturb them. "Meet your son," Helena said softly. He reached out with a trembling hand to touch the baby's tiny fist, and the infant's fingers immediately closed around his thumb. Ethan made a choked sound, tears running freely down his face. "He is perfect. You are both perfect." He bent to kiss Helena's forehead, then kissed the baby's head with infinite gentleness. "I love you both so much." They named him Samuel, after the man whose ranch had given them this new life. Samuel Ethan Mercer, born August 15, 1886, in the bedroom of the ranch house his parents had built together. The months that followed were a blur of sleepless nights and overwhelming love. Samuel proved to be a good baby, healthy and alert, with his father's gray-blue eyes and his mother's determined temperament. Ethan was a devoted father, taking his turn with night feedings and diaper changes without complaint, singing to Samuel in a surprisingly good voice when the baby was fussy. The ranch continued to thrive. By the time Samuel was 6 months old, their herd had grown to nearly 50 head, and they were being recognized as one of the more successful operations in the area. They had managed this without drawing undue attention, explaining their prosperity as a combination of hard work, good luck, and Helena's supposed inheritance. The hidden room beneath the house remained their secret, though they had added significantly to its security. Ethan had installed a second lock on the bookshelf panel and reinforced the door at the bottom of the stairs. They only went down there when absolutely necessary, preferring to keep that part of their lives separate from the daily reality of the ranch. On Samuel's first birthday, they hosted a party that brought together many of their neighbors and friends from Fort Garland. The house was filled with laughter and music, the tables groaning under the weight of food. Samuel, dressed in a little suit Helena had sewn, was passed from person to person, accepting the attention with his father's serious expression. As Helena stood on the porch watching Ethan play with their son in the yard, Mrs. Calloway came to stand beside her. "You have built something beautiful here," the older woman said. "When you first walked into my store asking about that auction, I thought you were either the bravest or the most foolish woman I had ever met. Now I know it was bravery." "I just followed my heart," Helena replied. "Everything else fell into place." "Not everything falls into place without tremendous effort, dear. Give yourself credit for what you have accomplished." That night, after all the guests had gone and Samuel was asleep in his crib, Helena and Ethan sat together on the porch swing, watching the stars emerge in the darkening sky. "1 year," Ethan mused. "1 year since we got married. 2 years since you bought this place for $1. Best dollar I ever spent," he laughed and pulled her closer. "I love our life, Helena, every chaotic, exhausting, wonderful moment of it. So do I, though I have been thinking." "About what?" "About giving Samuel a sibling. I do not want him to be an only child." Ethan turned to look at her, a slow smile spreading across his face. "Is that so?" "That is so." He kissed her then, deep and lingering, and she felt the familiar warmth spread through her body. They had learned each other thoroughly over the past year, had discovered what brought pleasure and comfort, had built a physical intimacy that was as strong as their emotional connection. "Then we should probably get started on that," he murmured against her lips. She laughed and took his hand, leading him inside and up to their bedroom, where they loved each other with the practiced ease of a couple who had weathered storms and emerged stronger for it. The years passed in a rhythm of seasons and growth. Helena did become pregnant again, giving birth to a daughter they named Rose in the spring of 1888. Rose had her mother's chestnut hair and hazel eyes, and from the moment she could crawl, she followed her older brother everywhere. The ranch prospered. Their cattle operation expanded, and they added horses as well, breeding stock that became known for quality throughout the region. They built a new bunkhouse for the ranch hands they employed, expanded the barn, and renovated the house to include indoor plumbing, a luxury that made Helena nearly weep with gratitude. They never forgot the secret that had made it all possible. The gold remained hidden, their foundation and security, but they no longer needed to touch it. The ranch generated enough income to sustain them comfortably. The gold was now simply insurance, a safety net for their children's future. In 1890, Helena gave birth to twin boys, James and Thomas, who arrived early and caused everyone tremendous worry until the doctor assured them both babies were healthy. The house was now filled with the sounds of children, with laughter and tears, with the beautiful chaos of family life. Ethan proved to be as wonderful a father as Helena had known he would be. He taught Samuel to ride and rope, played endless games of pretend with Rose, and spent hours rocking the twins when they were colicky. He was patient and gentle but also firm when needed, and all 4 children clearly adored him. On a warm evening in June 1892, Helena stood at the kitchen window watching her family in the yard. Samuel, now nearly 6 years old, was helping Ethan with the horses. Rose, 4 years old, was gathering wildflowers with intense concentration. The twins, 2 years old, were toddling around under the watchful eye of Sarah, who still lived with them and had become an indispensable part of the household. Helena was pregnant again, though this time she had told only Ethan. She was about 3 months along and still easily hiding it beneath her skirts. But soon enough, everyone would know there would be another Mercer joining the family. She had never imagined her life could be this full, this rich with love and purpose. There were hard days, of course. Days when the work seemed endless, when the children were sick or cranky, when money was tight because they had to reinvest everything in the ranch. But those days were far outweighed by the good ones, by mornings waking up in Ethan's arms, by the sound of her children's laughter, by the satisfaction of seeing something they had built together thriving. That night, after the children were finally asleep, Helena and Ethan sat together in the study where it had all begun. The bookshelf that hid the secret passage looked like any other bookshelf now, its secret completely concealed. "I never thanked Samuel Whitmore," Helena said suddenly. "Not properly. He left us all of this, and I never even knew him." "He left it to whoever was brave enough to take a chance on a failing ranch in winter," Ethan replied. "That was you. You earned this, Helena. We earned this together." She leaned against him, his arm coming around her automatically. "I am pregnant again." She felt him tense in surprise, then relax into joy. "Again? Really, really? Are you happy?" "Happy, I am ecstatic, though our house is getting quite full." "Then perhaps we should add on. Build a proper addition with more bedrooms." "We can do that. We can do anything, Helena. We have built something strong here, something that will last for generations." She turned to kiss him, pouring all her love into it. "I never get tired of kissing you." "Good, because I plan on kissing you for the next 50 years at least." Their 5th child, a daughter they named Grace, was born in January 1893 on a snowy afternoon that reminded Helena of the day she had first purchased the ranch. The birth was easier than the previous ones, and Grace was a placid baby who rarely cried and seemed content to observe the chaos of her siblings with calm interest. The ranch continued to expand. They now employed 6 full-time ranch hands and several seasonal workers. Ethan had become known as one of the most successful ranchers in the region, often consulted by neighbors on breeding programs and range management. Helena had developed a reputation as well, not just as Ethan's wife, but as a savvy businesswoman in her own right, who handled the ranch's finances and marketing with skill. They became pillars of the Fort Garland community. Ethan served on the town council, and Helena organized charitable efforts for families in need. They donated money to build a new schoolhouse and funded a scholarship for promising students who wanted to attend university. All of this they did carefully, always with explanations ready, never spending so lavishly that it would raise questions. The gold remained their secret, known only to the two of them. Samuel grew into a thoughtful, serious boy who loved books as much as he loved ranching. He would spend hours in the study, reading everything he could find, but he was equally happy helping his father with the cattle. Rose was adventurous and bold, constantly climbing trees and racing her brothers, declaring she would be a rancher when she grew up. The twins were inseparable, finishing each other's sentences and getting into mischief as a team. And little Grace was developing into a sweet-natured child who seemed to have inherited her father's calm wisdom. In 1895, a traveling photographer came through Fort Garland, and Helena insisted they have a family portrait made. They dressed in their finest clothes and posed on the front porch of the ranch house. Ethan and Helena seated with Grace on Helena's lap, the other 4 children arranged around them. When the photograph was developed and framed, Helena hung it in the sitting room where she could see it every day. It showed a family that was happy and healthy, prosperous and strong. It showed everything she had dreamed of during those dark days after her parents had died. One evening in the spring of 1896, Ethan found Helena in the study, looking at the bookshelf that hid their secret. She turned when he entered, and he could see she had been crying. "What is wrong?" he asked immediately, crossing to her. "Nothing is wrong. I was just thinking about how strange life is. How one decision, one moment of courage can change everything. If I had not gone to that auction, if I had not bid on this ranch, if I had not found that gold, if I had not trusted you, none of this would exist. Our children would not exist." Ethan pulled her into his arms, resting his chin on top of her head. "But you did all of those things. You were brave when it would have been easier to be afraid. You took a risk when everyone said you were foolish, and you built something extraordinary." "We built something extraordinary," she corrected. "I could not have done any of this without you. Then we are perfectly matched because I could not have done it without you either." They stood there together, holding each other in the room where their partnership had truly begun, surrounded by the life they had created. Samuel turned 13 in 1899, officially becoming a teenager and taking on more responsibility around the ranch. He was tall for his age, already approaching his father's height, and he had Ethan's way of thinking through problems carefully before acting. But he also had his mother's determination and refusal to accept limitations. Rose, at 11, was still declaring she would run her own ranch someday, and Helena had no doubt she would. She was teaching Rose everything she knew about finances and management, believing girls should have the same opportunities as boys. The twins, now 9, were developing distinct personalities despite their physical similarity. James was artistic and dreamy, always drawing or imagining elaborate stories. Thomas was practical and methodical, interested in how things worked and how to fix them when they broke. Grace, at 6 years old, was gentle and intuitive, seeming to always know when someone needed comfort or help. She would bring her father wildflowers when he had a hard day, and she would sit quietly with her mother when Helena was tired, just keeping her company. Helena was now 36 years old, and though she felt every bit of the hard work that had gone into building the ranch, she also felt strong and capable. Her hair had a few strands of silver now, and there were lines around her eyes, but when she looked in the mirror, she saw a woman who had lived a full life and had no regrets. Ethan, at 40, was still as handsome as the day she had met him, though his dark hair was graying at the temples. He had grown into his role as rancher and father with the same care and competence he brought to everything. He still looked at her the way he had in those early days, with love and wonder, as though he could not quite believe his good fortune. They still made time for each other, stealing moments alone when they could, maintaining the romance and passion that had brought them together. Sometimes they would ride out to a distant part of the ranch and spend an afternoon together, away from the demands of children and work, just being Ethan and Helena again instead of Mr. and Mrs. Mercer. On their 15th wedding anniversary in 1901, Ethan surprised Helena by taking her to Denver for a week, leaving the children in Sarah's capable care. It was the first time they had been away from the ranch for more than a day since they had married, and Helena felt like a young woman again as they explored the city, attended the theater, and stayed in a fine hotel. On their last night before returning home, as they lay in the hotel bed, Ethan said, I want you to know that these have been the best 15 years of my life. Every single day with you has been a gift." Helena turned to face him, tracing the lines of his face with her finger. "Even the hard days. The days when the cattle got sick, or the children were impossible, or money was tight. Especially those days. Because we faced them together. Helena, I fell in love with you so quickly it scared me, but I have fallen deeper in love with you every day since. Watching you be a mother, watching you run the ranch, watching you grow into the incredible woman you are now, it has been the privilege of my life." She kissed him then, and they made love slowly and tenderly, reaffirming the bond that had held them together through everything. The years continued to pass. Samuel graduated from the local school at the top of his class and declared he wanted to attend university in Denver to study agriculture and business. Helena and Ethan supported his decision, proud that their son wanted to improve himself and bring new knowledge back to the ranch. Rose decided she wanted to go to university as well, a bold choice for a young woman in 1903, but Helena had raised her to believe she could do anything. The twins were considering their options, James leaning toward art and Thomas toward engineering. Only Grace seemed certain she wanted to stay on the ranch, already declaring at age 10 that this was her home and she never wanted to leave. In 1904, when Samuel was 18 and preparing to leave for Denver, he approached his parents in the study one evening. His expression was serious, and Helena felt a flutter of worry. "Mother, Father, I need to talk to you about something." "Of course," Ethan said, gesturing to a chair. "What is on your mind?" Samuel sat down, his hands clasped between his knees. "I have been thinking about the ranch, about our family's success. I am not a fool. I know we are far more prosperous than we should be given how recently we established ourselves. I know Mother supposedly inherited some money, but the timeline has never quite made sense to me." Helena and Ethan exchanged a glance. They had always known this day might come, when their children would start asking questions. "What are you suggesting?" Helena asked carefully. "I am not suggesting anything improper," Samuel said quickly. "I trust you both completely, but I think there is something you have not told us, something about how this all began. And now that I am an adult, now that I am about to go out into the world, I feel like I have a right to know." Ethan looked at Helena, a question in his eyes. She thought about it for a long moment, then nodded slowly. Samuel was right. He was an adult now, and he deserved the truth. "All right," Helena said, "but what we tell you must remain absolutely secret. Not even your siblings can know, not yet." "Can you promise us that?" "I promise." Helena rose and pressed the hidden panel. Samuel's eyes widened as the bookshelf swung open, revealing the dark passage beyond. "Follow us," Ethan said, lighting a lamp. They descended the stairs together, and Samuel stopped at the bottom, staring at what remained of Samuel Whitmore's fortune. There was still a significant amount of gold left, though they had used much of it over the years. "My God," Samuel breathed. "You found this?" "The day I inspected the property," Helena confirmed. "It is how we restored the ranch, how we built everything you have grown up with. But if anyone found out, if word spread, it would destroy us. People would come, people with guns and greed, and everything we have built would be torn apart." Samuel nodded slowly, processing this information. "How much is there?" "Enough to secure your future and your siblings' futures. Enough to keep the ranch prosperous for generations if managed wisely. This is your inheritance, Samuel, yours and your brothers and sisters, but it must be protected." "I understand." He looked at his parents with new respect. "You have carried this secret alone all these years. That must have been difficult." "We had each other," Ethan said simply. "That made all the difference." They returned upstairs, closing the panel behind them. Samuel hugged both his parents tightly. Thank you for trusting me with the truth. I will protect this secret with my life." "We know you will," Helena said. "You have always been wise beyond your years." Samuel left for Denver 2 weeks later, and Helena cried as she watched him ride away, even though she was proud of him. Her firstborn, her serious, thoughtful boy, going out into the world to make his mark. But he returned for every holiday and summer break, full of stories about his studies and the city. He brought his learning back to the ranch, implementing new techniques and approaches that increased productivity even further. Rose followed him to Denver 2 years later, enrolling in a women's college and declaring her intention to study business and finance. She wrote weekly letters full of excitement about her classes and her new friends, about the suffragette meetings she attended and the books she was reading. The twins went together in 1908, James to study art and Thomas to study engineering, just as they had planned. The house felt empty with 4 of the 5 children gone, only Grace remaining, now 15 years old and more devoted to the ranch than ever. But the emptiness was also peaceful. Helena and Ethan, now in their 40s, found themselves with more time alone than they had had in years. They took long rides together, spent evenings reading by the fire, and rediscovered the quiet intimacy that had marked their early days. "We did well," Ethan said one evening as they sat on the porch, watching the sunset paint the mountains gold and red. "Our children are happy and healthy and pursuing their dreams. The ranch is thriving. We have built something that will outlast us." "We did very well," Helena agreed. "Though I miss them, I miss the chaos of a full house. They will be back, and they will bring grandchildren eventually, and the chaos will return." Helena laughed. "I am not ready to be a grandmother yet." "Then you should not have been such a good mother. You set the bar very high." She leaned against him, and he wrapped his arm around her, and they sat there in comfortable silence as the day faded into night. Samuel graduated in 1907 with honors and returned to the ranch permanently, immediately implementing changes that modernized their operations. He also began courting a young woman from Fort Garland, Emily Dawson, a teacher at the new school. They married in 1909 in a ceremony that brought joy to everyone who attended. Rose graduated in 1909 and shocked everyone by announcing she had been offered a job with a bank in Denver, one of the first female financial advisors they had hired. Helena was bursting with pride, even though it meant Rose would not be returning to the ranch permanently. The twins graduated in 1912. James had sold several paintings and was planning to open a studio in Denver. Thomas was offered a position with a mining company, designing safety equipment. Both of them would visit frequently, but would make their lives elsewhere. Only Grace remained on the ranch, now 19 years old and showing no inclination to leave. She worked alongside her father and brother, learning every aspect of the operation, and she was courting a young ranch hand named Daniel Porter, who clearly worshipped the ground she walked on. In 1913, Samuel and Emily's first child was born, a son they named Ethan after his grandfather. Helena held her first grandchild with tears streaming down her face, marveling at how life continued in cycles, how her love was now reflected in this tiny new person. Grace and Daniel married in 1914, and Grace remained on the ranch as she had always intended. By 1915, she was pregnant with her first child, and the house was once again preparing for a new generation. Helena was 52 years old now, and Ethan was 56. They had slowed down somewhat, letting Samuel and Grace handle more of the day-to-day operations of the ranch. But they were both still active and engaged, still partners in every sense. On a warm spring evening in 1916, exactly 31 years after Helena had purchased the ranch for $1, she and Ethan walked through the property together. The house had been expanded twice and was now a sprawling, comfortable home. The barns and outbuildings were well maintained and efficient. The herds were healthy and productive. Everywhere they looked, they saw the fruits of their labor and their love. They ended up at the spot where Ethan had first taught Helena to shoot, where they had shared their first kiss. Ethan pulled her close, and she went willingly into his arms. "You remember that day?" he asked. "Right here when I told you I was trying not to fall in love with you. I remember. I was trying not to fall in love with you too. We both failed spectacularly." He laughed, the sound warm and rich. "Best failure of my life. Mine too." They kissed, and it was as sweet and stirring as their first kiss had been, 30 years of love and partnership deepening the connection between them. "I love you, Helena Mercer. I will love you until the day I die and beyond. I love you too, Ethan. You are my heart. You are my home." They stood there as the sun set, two people who had taken a risk on each other and on a failing ranch and had built something extraordinary. They had raised 5 children who were all pursuing their own dreams. They had created prosperity from nothing. They had protected a secret that had given them security. They had loved each other through good times and hard times, through joy and sorrow, through 30 years of marriage. And they had done it all together. The years ahead would bring more grandchildren, would bring the inevitable losses of aging, would bring new challenges and new joys. But Helena and Ethan would face them as they had faced everything else, side by side, hand in hand, 2 hearts beating as one. In 1920, they celebrated their 35th wedding anniversary with all 5 children, their spouses, and their 7 grandchildren gathered at the ranch. The house was full of laughter and love, of multiple generations coming together to celebrate the foundation that Helena and Ethan had built. That night, after everyone had finally gone to bed, Helena and Ethan slipped down to the hidden room one last time. There was still gold there, still security for their descendants, but they had not needed to touch it in years. The ranch was entirely self-sufficient now. "Should we tell the others?" Helena asked. "All the children, not just Samuel. Eventually, yes, when the time is right. For now, let them enjoy what we have built without the burden of this secret." They returned upstairs and closed the panel for what would be the last time they descended together. The secret was safe, their family was thriving, and their love was as strong as ever. Helena lived to the age of 78, passing peacefully in her sleep in 1942 with Ethan holding her hand. She had lived to see all 5 of her children married and happy, had held 17 grandchildren and 3 great-grandchildren. She had seen the ranch continue to prosper through good times and bad, had seen her family become one of the most respected in Colorado. Her last words to Ethan were, "Thank you for the adventure." Ethan followed her 3 years later, dying at the age of 82 in the bedroom they had shared for more than half a century. His last words were Helena's name. They were buried side by side on a hill overlooking the ranch, beneath 2 simple headstones that read, Helena Tucker Mercer, 1863-1942, beloved wife, mother, and grandmother Ethan Mercer, 1859-1945, beloved husband, father, and grandfather. The ranch remained in the family for generations, each one building on the foundation that Helena and Ethan had established. The secret of the hidden room was eventually revealed to all the descendants, the remaining gold distributed to ensure every member of the family had security and opportunity. But more valuable than any gold was the legacy of love and partnership that Helena and Ethan had created. They had shown what was possible when 2 people trusted each other completely, when they worked together toward common goals, when they chose love even in the face of uncertainty. Their story became family legend, told and retold to each new generation. The story of how Helena purchased a ranch in winter for $1 and found not just gold hidden inside, but love, purpose, and a future beyond her wildest dreams. It was a reminder that sometimes the greatest treasures are not the ones you find, but the ones you build with your own hands and heart. The ranch house still stood well into the 21st century, carefully preserved by descendants who understood its significance. The hidden room was kept as a museum of sorts, a testament to the secret that had changed everything. But the real memorial to Helena and Ethan was not in any building or buried treasure. It was in the love that their descendants continued to share, in the values they had passed down, in the example they had set of what marriage and partnership could be in the end. Helena's $1 investment in that winter ranch had paid dividends that could never be measured in gold. It had purchased a legacy of love that would endure long after the last gold bar had been spent, long after the last descendant had heard the story, long after the ranch itself had passed into history. Because true love, real partnership, and the courage to take a chance on something that scares you, these things are worth more than all the gold in the world. Helena and Ethan had understood that from the very beginning, from that first moment when she decided to bid on a failing ranch, and from that first moment when he decided to trust this strange, determined woman who had purchased it. They had built something beautiful together, something lasting, something that proved the Wild West was not just about violence and hardship and struggle. It was also about new beginnings, about second chances, about finding love in unexpected places and building dreams from nothing but determination and hope. And in the end, that was the secret inside the ranch that mattered most. Not the gold hidden beneath the floorboards, but the love that filled every room, every corner, every inch of land. A love that had started with two lonely souls finding each other in a harsh winter, and that had grown into something that would warm generations yet to come. That was Helena and Ethan's true legacy. That was the treasure that could never be stolen, never diminish, never fade. It was a love story for the ages, born in the Wild West, enduring through time, and proving that sometimes the best investments are not made with money but with heart.